Hello, everyone. So I am Julian. Thank you so much for coming. The first time we did a Stacked Pathways meetup, there was 7 of us in a pub. And this is obviously quite different and very, very daunting. We're really, really proud of Stacked Pathways. It was born out of a conversation with a CDO at the Financial Times, who said her biggest challenge was trying to actually hire a diverse shortlist of data professionals, and that there was a lot of opportunity for women who had maybe got to leadership levels, and there's lots of really, really fantastic initiatives for people getting into data, but actually often women would maybe be forgotten about once they've got into their careers. She pointed me in the direction of the McKinsey Women in Work study, and I had a read of it, and their analysis is really, really interesting. So women and males coming into the career it's very, very balanced, 52% males, 48% women. But then when you get to the C-suite, women is only 18%. So drop off is a really, really big problem. And later on in the report, it goes on to say that allyship and mentorship are 2 of the best weapons for trying to tackle this. So off the back of that, Harry and I thought maybe we could play a really small part with Stacked Pathways. So what we tried to do is we identify really amazing senior directors, heads of, in a data position who are female, and then we offer a free mentorship service.
Matchmaker.
And we play matchmaker. So this is our 3rd cohort. We've helped coming up to 200 women now. So 400 in terms of mentors and mentees have been on the program so far, and we're about to start cohort 3. That's going to kick off in a few weeks. If there's anyone in here who would love to be a mentor, then obviously we would love to speak to you. And there are already some mentors in the room. So thank you to those of you that have volunteered. If there are some mentees that would love to find a mentor, then we would love the opportunity to speak to you and try and match you up with somebody. We've had some really, really some fantastic success stories of people that have really, I think, like honed into their skill set. So I think it's not necessarily all about finding a new manager or finding a new role. It's not necessarily about career. I think some of the best things that I've seen that have come from it is learning, maybe about how do I deal with those stakeholders? How can I overcome my imposter syndrome? One of the ladies there was a lady called Kathy Pendleton who works at Gusto. She's had 3 children, and every time that she told her company that she was pregnant, she was made redundant within 6 months. So there's some really, really great things that we hope that can come off the back of this. So yeah, please sign up. Links are there. And also there's some of the Cognify team, Harry, myself, Jack, Michael, and Robbie are around. So yeah, come and say hi, and then I'll pass over to Adam, who's going to crack on with the talks.
Thank you, Julian. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Analytics Engineering Meetup. I'm Adam Darthy. I'm going to be the least important person talking tonight. I'm the moderator, which means I'm going to try to make sure the conversation flows and also that we keep to time, which is definitely the most boring thing that you're going to hear tonight. As the guys have said, this is Allies of Women in Data. That's the overall theme of the talk. And we've got 4 fantastic panelists that I'm going to pass it over to in a second to do some introductions. The idea behind tonight is we're hoping that by hearing them talk about their careers and their development, you can get a bit of foresight into how your career might develop, and then maybe also some inspiration and maybe a bit more confidence about what your next steps might look like. We've got a decent amount of time to ask people questions. We've got a decent amount of time for me to ask them questions, but there'll be a big chunk of time for you guys to ask questions at the end, potentially like 30 minutes. So if you do have questions that you feel haven't been covered or you would like to ask them yourselves, feel free to say them till afterwards. I'm going to pass it over to each one of the speakers to give a short introduction about themselves. I'm telling the speakers this for the first time, so apologies. There's one microphone, so we're going to have to do a bit of a pass the parcel. So I'm going to pass over to Klara.
Cool, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Klara. What's my intro? I work at Monzo. I'm a senior analytics engineering manager at Monzo. My team looks after a few different parts of our business, but looks after some of the data behind what you might use every day when you're using the app. So kind of our budgeting tools, our subscriptions features, the kind of general look and feel of the app, stuff like that. So lots of data coming through there. Prior to Monzo, I've worked in a few different roles, few different industries, but I come from Canada. And yeah, now I've been in the UK now for about 6 years and working on my UK passport. So wish me luck. Thanks.
Do you have to do one of those exams?
Yeah, I do.
You're going to know more than me, and I've lived here all my life. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see so many folks here. I'm Sara. I'm the VP of Data at Beauty Pie. There's a few people from my team there. If you don't know what Beauty Pie is a very disruptive, membership-led beauty business in the UK and the US, and it's changing the way in which people buy luxury beauty products online. You know, if you want to be a member, I'd recommend it. So in my role as VP of Data, it's a pretty broad role in terms of leadership across the function, from data engineering, analytics engineering, insight, analytics, experimentation through to machine learning. So I'd call it like a really broad set of pillars within our function. I've been there for all of 3 months, but so far it's gone well. Before that, a real mix of roles in terms of industries. So I was in fintech growth business for 5 years. I've been in music technology and some other ones before the way, but probably not the most classic entry point in terms of where I started. And I'm happy to talk on that later. And then final fact about me, I have an English bulldog called Basil. So if anyone wants to talk about dogs after this, I'm your person.
Hi, I'm Holly. I am the Analytics Engineering Manager at Tesco. I'm also new to the role, so I'm only 3 months in. I'm pretty sure everyone here will have heard of Tesco. I'll be very shocked if you haven't. So I look after essentially cyber data security. So it's a brand new team, Greenfields project. My manager was brought in to kind of build out the capabilities. So essentially we can do our own in-house kind of detection, so parts of kind of machine learning, that kind of thing. So before that, I was also in the beauty space. I was at Trinity London for 3 years, and I've also worked in very random places, telecoms, financial services, all over. So in my role, it's very specifically an analytics engineering, and I think that's it. I don't think I have a fun fact. I was like, should I do one? But I don't think I have anything fun about me to say. I don't think I do. I'm quite boring.
Thanks.
The most difficult question. One done back.
Yeah, what's your worst Tesco item?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually quite an easy one because it's like they have everything. Yeah.
Tesco popcorn.
Yeah, I think on my Club Card app, I'm like one of the top buyers of those like single yogurts, like the Faye yogurt. I buy one every day from Tesco. That's how excited my life is.
I'm a Sainsbury's girl. Sorry. Apologies. So I'm Lucy. I'm head of analytics engineering at Gelato. I will do the common joke, which is we do not sell ice cream. We are a print on demand company. So we provide software and the platform for businesses to build out, so for small businesses to build out their own printing company. So you can set up your own store on Etsy tomorrow using our platform. Within my role, I've kind of new to the role as well, maybe 5 months, 6 months. I'm in charge of a small team. Our business is kind of about 300 people, so we're kind of in that scale up phase. Analytics engineering kind of bleeds into all of the data areas at the moment. So we're kind of working on machine learning projects as well as building out our new data models and kind of building out our data warehousing space. And yeah, lots of exciting projects, very chaotic sometimes, and also, yeah, really interesting. Before that, I worked at Wolf and Badger, which was another similar scale up startup environment, whereas the kind of first data hire there, and that was kind of one of those amazing roles where I could learn everything on the job, and it was fantastic. Yeah, so no fun facts about me other than my love of Sainsbury's. It will never change. And no. Yeah, so we can carry on.
There's going to be a lot of back and forth, passing the baton. I'm going to start off maybe with Lucy. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that there is a bit of a diverse background of people here and how they got into data. So I'm going to start off with Lucy. Do you want to tell us about how you got into data to begin with?
Thank you. So I guess kind of a difficult one. I got into data probably like the first kind of time I kind of discovered data was a role, I guess. I don't think it would be a career I would have known of when I started out studying. I studied finance, quite boring. Like a lecturer told me about R programming for kind of a statistics module, and I was like, what's this? R programming? This is interesting. Kind of opened up a world for me. I'd done a placement as a merchandiser at Debenhams. Great, kind of like first insight into a role. And then I did another merchandising job, and I was working with a BI tool. So I was like, what's this? And kind of put all the dots together, and then kind of discovered, oh, you can study data at university. So I did a master's, and then that kind of propelled me into doing programming. So yeah, I think, and then what I discovered in data, everyone does have this kind of random path into it, because it's not, now it seems more typical that you might go and study it, or you might go and, I think a lot of going down a master's path is quite common. I think when I first started, it wasn't as common. But yeah, that's kind of what sparked it in me, was kind of discovering what programming was and learning a bit more about data science and those kind of histories. And now it just seems like everybody knows about it. It seems like a common career path you could take, but yeah. It sounds like it was a million years ago, but it wasn't really.
I'm going to ask one follow-up question, because I think you're the only one who's studied data. Everyone else has kind of fallen into it professionally. So I'm interested to know, do you think that you learned things doing your master's that you didn't know from being on the job? Is there something like, would you recommend people to go and do a master's in data science or data analytics? Huh?
Yeah, short answer, it's not a complete no. Obviously, definitely always study. It's great. But I'd say after finishing my master's, I was like, I'm going to get a job in data. This will be great. And then it was like, do you know SQL? And I was like, well, I've designed a small database for a small project. And I didn't know any SQL really, like practically. So I would say more so on the job learning is where I feel like I've actually progressed. So definitely don't feel like you need to go and study anything in particular. I think it's on the job. And yeah, SQL is my normal mantra.
I'm going to pass the same question about how you got into data. I'll pass it over to Holly.
Oh, thank you. So I think actually a very similar kind of career path. Well, so I studied physics at university. I did a master's in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I knew that I wanted to go traveling. So my friend's sister was hiring at Tesco really randomly for an HR assistant. So actually that was my first job, was an HR assistant. And I think probably like you with the merchandising, it gives you a really good insight into the working world. Like whatever your first job is, you're like, oh, wow, this is actually great. Like they pay you to come in every day instead of like spending money, which is amazing. But then afterwards, I'd come back and I was like, all right, I need to just get a job, you know, and I had no idea what I wanted. And a graduate scheme was hiring at the telecoms company for kind of, I was actually in a software role randomly. So very much just kind of, and then I moved into a kind of a data analyst role. Again, like there was, for me, I think there was no rhyme or reason. I wanted to use, I was good at maths. I wanted to use like my mathematical skills and brain. Data, I think, can give you, seemed quite interesting, that you were kind of solving problems every day, and you got to do that. I was like, that's cool that you can do that, but also you have more of a human interaction. Often you're talking to stakeholders. So I think it was just, again, kind of just like a random piece of luck that I ended up here. I think I could have ended up really in any kind of role, but I think it just kind of happened that I fell into it.
Next one, Sara.
Skipping me. Yeah, so I did an arts degree. So completely useless for in data. But actually, the good thing about it was that, again, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had the privilege to be able to kind of have some options. And I started out in a consultancy. So that was like always, about data and being able to provide recommendations to businesses. But what I liked about how I started was that it was like a really broad role. So I'd work with different clients in different sectors on different types of data sets. And it really honed my skills at the beginning and being able to like identify what is the question, what problem we're trying to solve, as well as like technically answer it. So again, like by accident, but a slightly different pathway in. I won't bore you with the middle part, but that was the way it started.
Yeah. I started off working at a market research company, so a pretty big global company. I did a business degree. I honestly thought I was going to be a marketer and be a brand owner at some company, and did a few internships at like big FMCGs, and then ended up getting a job at a market researcher, which was fun because it taught me the real basics of data analysis. So that's kind of where I learned the foundations in a grad scheme as well. But like learned very, very basic analysis of like, this is the number, how do you figure out what's drawing that number, and really understanding how to build a full analysis and tell a story with data, and then present it back to clients, or it was essentially a consultancy, and present it back to clients who can then build a business case and argue for whatever it was. More room at the supermarket to change their prices of their products, add another flavor to their product shelf, anything like that. So that was kind of the very basics of it. And then I just escalated in the next role. I got more technical, learned SQL. The next role, I was at Sainsbury's, learned a lot there. And then, now Monzo, I've changed even more and gone more into the analytics engineering rather than the analysis part. So it's just been expanding over time.
Thank you. Do you feel, I'm going to start off with you, Klara. Do you feel like your background before you got into data has actually helped you in your data role? Or do you think that it's added to like where your specialisms and strengths are based on market research?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, maybe the market research role, because I was working directly with companies and I had to understand their business models and how to argue for how to give them a story that they could use to get more of what they wanted with the retailer. But I think my like business degree and that kind of general, more broad understanding, I think analytics engineering as a discipline has kind of come in the middle of, it's closer to business than a data engineer is, right? And that's kind of how it tends to be, because you take business cases and business scenarios and you transform the data in a way that makes it useful for business stakeholders that are not very technical. So I think that part of it kind of helps because I learned what the end stakeholders were thinking and how they wanted to view the data and what kind of insights they wanted to draw from it. And it kind of helps connect those two dots between the technical and non-technical stakeholders.
If I could, I'm happy to ask another question unless you guys want to jump in and say something on that. No? So we have been talking about like mentorships and learning and development. And I think learning and development is critical when you're in a data role because the role is changing so often. So you need to keep up to date. Sorry, if I could ask you, how do you deal with your own learning and development over your career, especially starting from a non-data position?
God, now I'm going to be honest about how bad I am at my personal development plan. So I'd actually say I have never methodically really done like, I'm going to learn this training course and then I'm going to learn this skill. It's very much been like on the job as you go. And I suppose by nature of moving job and moving category and working with different clients, my ability to learn has been like sped up. I also was really lucky actually in that my first job was I graduated summer of 2007. You can guess my age now. And the financial crisis hit like 6 months after, I'd chosen not to go traveling and start work, but actually that really benefited me because they basically made huge cuts. Very few people got jobs. So I got to learn loads. So there've been like these massive leaps for me in learning on the job in moments of crisis. Like you've got to find some kind of silver lining. COVID was probably another one. So that I haven't, as I say, kind of formally had like a training path, but I have like had opportunistic ways to learn quite quickly because teams have been constrained. I've just been able to take on other things. And I suppose I've like been a bit brave enough to just try new stuff as well. And then I kind of knew relatively early on I wanted to be a broad manager leader rather than a deeply technical IC. And so that also gave me confidence to like not get too worried if I didn't have that deep technical understanding that some other folks had, because I'd be okay like learning in a general way. That makes sense.
I was going to make a comment, but feel free to agree or disagree. It sounds like from speaking to you, some of your strengths are also in your strategic kind of mindset and how you organize and deliver projects. And that seems to have also maybe been helped by your earlier career where you worked as I'm guessing, a strategy consultant. Yeah. But maybe that also helped. And that's maybe where some of your strengths come from, sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, again, kind of by good chance of how things evolved in the industry, I came in, I was in like more of the media telco space, and it was when Netflix became a thing, and suddenly everyone was like, fuck, we've got so much data, what do we do? And so because I developed those more strategic thinking frameworky type stuff, that was actually really good because it wasn't the volume or quality of the data that the problem. It was like, how do we apply it and how do we move fast enough to actually not lose our business, which was a lot of what the broadcasters were saying. So yeah, I think some of it is just kind of luck of the time, and some of it, you know, probably is some clever thinking elsewhere. But yeah, so I think I did kind of, you know, come in at the right time.
Thank you. Holly, a similar question for you. How do you go about your learning and development? Have you ever had a mentor? Pass over to you.
Yeah, so I actually had a mentor. I was in the last Stacked Pathways, and I think it was a great experience because not only did I have a mentor, but I also had a mentee. So I think actually having someone, you learn both ways. I think you learn being able to mentor someone is a hard skill, and to have the kind of opportunity to do that, I think was really great, and kind of you can transfer that a lot into your role, into the day-to-day, especially if you have a team. I think although you mentor them, I think spending one-on-one time with someone, understanding, you know, the challenges that they're facing in a different work environment, in a different business context is really important. And then I think on the flip side, my mentor was basically like having therapy every time I spoke to them. It was so good. I think, you know, when I was having a bad time at work, you can speak to that person, and, you know, you find out that they've gone through kind of similar things. And I think actually with a lot of learning and development, I think, especially in a technical role, you can really focus on the technical skills, which are obviously incredibly important. But actually, I think connecting with people and even, you know, understanding what it's like to work in a different place, what the struggles that they're having, how did they sort them out, actually is kind of a great way to learn and, you know, learn new skills, even directly, you know, just through talking to, you know, my mentor every week. I think it was really valuable and actually really helped me kind of move kind of through career blockades. I think sometimes you can really get stuck. Not, you know, you think you're kind of progressing, you've like learned a new tool or you're kind of doing things, but actually I think from a leadership perspective, having an outside perspective that isn't clouded by you know, your manager's very specific ideas of what success looks like, I think is really helpful, and also just opens you up to a whole world of potentially doing stuff in different ways and having a real neutral voice of being like, you don't have to do that like this, or, you know, you can say that to that person and that's okay. So I couldn't recommend it enough, kind of both from a mentor and a mentee perspective. It was, yeah, so with Stacked Pathways, everyone is... I think it did because they had experienced a lot of the same things that I had experienced, you know, talking kind of, you know, gender-based roles. I think it was very specific things that we both had experienced. And I don't know whether I would have got that from a male identifying mentor.
Thank you, Holly. A follow-up. If someone wanted to get the best out of their mentor, how would you suggest they approach it? For example, would you say that they should be organizing their gender points beforehand? What can you do to be able to get the best out of it?
Yeah, 100%. I think you need to, I think it's different when you're, there's kind of two different ways. I think when you're the mentor, you don't want to do that. You want to be led by the mentee. So not having, you don't want to have gender points, and you have to make sure that you're ready, you're able to kind of listen in a flexible way to kind of move through the problems with them. But with a mentor, you definitely need to be the proactive person. You know, it's your job to organize the meetings. It's your role to kind of bring up points, and then you can kind of flex through that. But I think you have to kind of take some time and take a step back and understand really where your weaknesses are. And actually, you know, using feedback from your work is a great way to kind of take that into the mentor session and see how, with a fresh pair of eyes, you can kind of tackle the issues that you know that you're having in the workplace.
Thank you. Just because I think learning and development is that important, I'm just going to repeat the same question to Lucy. How do you go about your own learning and development? Feel free to throw it back to me if you say it's already been covered.
I'm not going to say that. No. Yeah, I think only to add, I guess also I'm ready to get a mentor now. You've really sold up me because I haven't had a mentor. So I think that that point really resonated with me. I think I would benefit from one at this point. I think for me, I guess I've always focused, I probably have focused too much on technical skills. I think that was like a imposter kind of syndrome. Like I haven't got enough technical skills. That's where I've focused. So that's why I think something like a mentor would help me in those areas, being a new kind of to this head of role and those kind of things. So yeah, I would say probably the only thing to add is I don't, probably pay enough attention to my own learning and development outside of being technical. I think I focus too much on that, but I think it is really important. And I've really discovered that about myself in my new role is like exploring and trying and exploring in areas like doing things like this and attending more events and things, like flexing that muscle, I guess.
Can I actually come back on? I definitely, I think when I did my degree in physics, I definitely felt that it was 90% men, and it really knocked my confidence kind of technically, like I wasn't good enough. And then it's kind of ridiculous because obviously I can do it. And then you bring that into the workplace, but actually you're just as good as anyone else, or you have the capabilities to learn to be just as good as anyone else. And you kind of, I think there's a real imposter syndrome. And as a woman, you're often pushed to be like, oh, your managerial skills are kind of a natural skill that just come to you. And that's good. But actually, there's so much more kind of the leadership and kind of influence that we kind of forget. And I think from my mentor, that's what was one of the things that I really learned about, is kind of how to influence people in the right way.
I strongly relate. I was questioning myself whether I should say I did an arts degree, because I was like, well, then people will find out. And then I was like, they could just Google me. But I feel really similar to that. Like won't go through but you know, of the like, oh, but I'm not as technical, so can I really do my job in the way that I need to be able to? And then you get to a point where you're like, I just need to hire the right, like other levels of people and have enough, it needs to be good enough. I don't have, you know, it's a strength to also be good at leadership and management. And it turns out lots of other people aren't, and that's okay. But yeah, I had that very similar feelings for those very similar reasons.
If it's confession time, I also studied English literature as my undergrad, so I've got an arts degree background. If I'm honest, I've never met anyone who's senior in data and doesn't have some degree of imposter syndrome. So I'd love to hear how you guys deal with it. I'll pass it over to Lucy first. I assume you have that feeling of imposter syndrome. You said it yourself. How do you deal with it? How do you try to overcome it?
I don't think I deal with it very well. I don't know. I'm trying to think. How do I deal with it? To be honest, I think I look back at where I was and then look back at myself now. So I always think about that. And that's what I kind of thought about before I prepared for this event. I was like, I'd always be like, I think especially in data, there's so many new technologies, new things cropping up. That was always like make me feel like, oh, I just need to know this one thing, and then that'll be me ready and done. And now when I think and look back, I'm like, oh, like 5 years ago, Lucy couldn't do half the things that she can do now. 5 years ago, Lucy didn't know about these things. 5 years ago, Lucy wasn't, in this role. So I think it's, just kind of going back and reviewing, do a little self-review of where you've gone, like what you've done, and just be like, I'm amazing. Look how much I've achieved. So yeah, that's my top tip.
Yeah, so I used to work at Trinny London before this, and Trinny Woodall, who's the founder, who's like a celebrity stylist who had a makeup brand. She was always like, only women talk about imposter syndrome. It's not really something that ever talk about men. She's like, she banned it from the office. No one was ever allowed to talk about it. But I think it's just about kind of facing the fear. You can't. I think I just care less about what people think these days. I think earlier on I really cared. Did I say the right thing? And now it's just like, just say the thing in the meeting, just go for it. If it doesn't go down well, then, obviously don't go crazy, but like, if you have an idea, say it, I think it's about putting yourself out there and trying to avoid the fear and the judgment that you feel like you're going to get, because it's probably just yourself anyway. And actually, I think like you feel like, oh, I'm a failure, but actually failure is just you're just trying to learn and move forward, and actually you can't be successful. It's just the other side of success. So I think it's just about trying to kind of have your blinkers on a bit and just kind of go for it. Like this, 2 years ago, I'd never done something like this. And actually, I think you just kind of have to do, the first time I did this, I didn't sleep till like 5 a.m. the night before. I was so panicked about it. I was like, it's going to be so bad. I was like crying. And actually, it's fun. Like now, today, I was like, oh, it's going to, I didn't have that dread the whole day. And you just kind of have to do it and put in the practice, and you'll kind of get used to it. I think it's just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
I'm happy to ask you guys the same question, or I can flip it around. Should I flip it? I think it's we have another 10 minutes, but then we've got other people with 20 minutes. Oh, we got loads of time. Okay, go for it.
Okay, so this is like a topic I talk about a lot because I think it's great to talk about it out loud, and like I think it's fantastic to share more. So in terms of that feeling of an imposter, I will always have a natural small state of it. And actually the science and the research says that's normal and everyone has it. It's actually not more in women than men. It's actually a very gender neutral experience just based on the academics. The academic was a woman as well, so good on her. But actually my experience of that feeling was that it grew to a point that it became a problem. And so I was in a fintech where you've got like the two worst industries for gender parity come together. And that was really amplifying that feeling of being like an imposter, to the point where I was having to put so much energy into managing that negative thinking cycle that I was really starting to kind of hold myself back, essentially. And so I ended up doing my own like analysis on why it was happening and thinking about all that stuff. And I got some coaching as well from work to help me on it. And I learned a lot about myself. I think absolutely what you're saying is totally true, of like, you need to notice the self-improvements. And for me, it's that I'm not trying to not feel like an imposter. I'm just trying to not make it a problem for me in terms of my levels of energy. I think a phrase of like, welcome fellow imposters is a good thing, because everyone feels like it sometimes. And then just seeking out environments that make it less painful. So I'm now in a business that is more women-led than men. And I have to say, it is a treat. I don't have as many of those feelings because I'm not in as many of those environments. So if you can find those environments, great. Often we can't. But you can seek out those communities who do like give you the right balance and help you manage that negative thinking. And so I've never had a mentor, but I have had like a group of like, I'd call them champions. They're my like good workmates, and they can help me in the overthinking. So yeah, so it's been a right old journey, but I think it's really good to talk about it if it's something you feel, but like, you're never going to silence it. You're just going to make it quiet, basically.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. I think it never fully goes away. The way that I deal with it, and I think the more, what I consider quite practical to deal with, is I tend to dive deep into the details of whether it's something I'm arguing that I don't feel fully comfortable with, or I feel like my opinion isn't really valued, or whatever it might be. I'll dive deeper into the details and reread the thread, or go back and look outside of it, around it, and make sure that I fully understand what I'm talking about, so that I feel confident when I'm talking about it, or when I'm replying to something, or when I'm speaking up. It requires a bit extra work, but if it means that I'm a bit calmer and I feel better about the response, then I'll always do it. And I tend to end up learning more because I dive deeper into it. So that's the first one. The second one is to make friends at work. I have some really great people around me. One of them is in the very back, and John, and I do message him and say, hey, am I going insane, or is my opinion right here? Because genuinely, confirmation bias is great, and it really does silence that as well. So I have a few people at work, whether it's an equivalent in engineering, or it's other AE managers, that I can message and say, am I going insane, or is this is my opinion right? And then when they approve that and they say, yeah, you are, fantastic. Then I feel a lot better about it. The idea should be that after a few times you do that and you get that positive confirmation, you stop needing, essentially those training wheels, and stop needing people to confirm your opinions, and you get more confident, and then you move on. But I think it is helpful to have peers, whether it's within work or outside of work, to kind of confirm what you're thinking, so that you feel more confident about it.
Thank you. I actually worked with John at Farfetch, and he's also one of my good data people. So I've got a soft spot for him as well. Making friends all over the place, John. I almost pushed the question I had from my head, but if I can, Lucy, I'm going to pass it back to you. I'm interested. I'm going to ask one more question about imposter syndrome, then I'm going to flip it back round. With imposter syndrome, do you think it's gotten worse as you've become more senior to a certain extent? Like, you have greater exposure and you probably have to work with different areas in data that you weren't comfortable with? Or do you feel like it's actually gotten better the more experienced you've become? So to what extent does it correlate with your seniority?
I think it's definitely gotten worse. I don't know, but I guess I'd say yeah, I think it's just about different things. So I think previously it was maybe about, I would maybe not want to speak up in a meeting and that experience. Now, when you're running the meeting, you kind of, especially on a Zoom meeting where everyone's muted and you're like, am my jokes landing? Is everyone having a fun time? I run a stand-up on every day, and I'm always how to psych myself up for the stand-up. I'm like, is this stand-up going to go well? And, it can get a bit like that. So I think it's just maybe different reasons for the imposter syndrome. Yeah, generally it is the same. And I think, like you're saying, just quieten that voice a bit. So I'll make a joke out of how bad I am at running my stand-ups. And, but also, yeah, I think it's different reasons and different ways you can get that imposter syndrome. But I think it's not like it gets easier, but I think you probably just recognize it more. And so then just have better methods of coping with it.
Happy for you guys to also pitch in if you want to say that. Otherwise, I'm going to ask a slightly different twist on the question. Okay, so the imposter syndrome is about us internally feeling like there's some areas where we're uncomfortable with and that we're speaking without full confidence. I kind of want to flip it a little bit and talk about, as a candidate or someone that's in your teams, what are the characteristics that you look for that you can use to say this is a really good person or this is a really good data person? Holly, I'll ask you.
Yeah, I think great people come in all different kind of shapes and sizes of what that's good. And I think you need a real mix for that. I think what I always look for is if you push someone, or as in you're pushing to get a result, or not physically push anyone, and you're trying to push someone, or to to kind of go further, even in an interview, you're interviewing someone and they don't know the answer. I think it's that mental resilience, to be able to think, okay, what tools do I have to be able to answer this question? And the tool might be, I need to go and speak to that person to find out the thing, or I need to Google it. I need to use ChatGPT to make me understand this, or, it's that being able to not just think, okay, I've never done this before, so I can't do it. I think it's, okay, I haven't done this before. How how can I, with what I have, my own skills and the resources around me, you know, make that happen. I think for me, that's one of the most important skills.
Yeah, I can talk to it from a hiring context because I feel like I'm spending all my time hiring at the moment. I think there are two like good things that happen in interviews. One is I love finding people's CVs who have had a bit of a career switch. Like they've studied this and then they've ended up changing and like doing something else, or be that like academically or in work, and it shows like a level of bravery, I think, in CVs. I know that's like a general point, but I think it also speaks to feeling like an imposter, because whether or not they felt like that, they've decided to do the hard thing anyway. And then I think the other thing when I meet people and then maybe they're doing presentations is actually people that can say like, I'm not sure, I don't know. This is probably the thing I'd do. And like, I think it's good when people are able to be honest about that, because again, it shows like they don't feel like they have to be perfect at everything, but they're willing to like have a go at it. So again, it's like those moments of resilience and almost like bravery, whether that be a big thing like a career change or a small thing like saying you're not 100% sure.
Laura, actually, same question for you.
So one thing I think we look for is when you talk about your previous kind of experience, looking for people who really take ownership in their roles is a big one for us, because you tend to be going from like the raw kind of events that are sent through to how they're being reported to stakeholders. So being able to own the whole process and know everything from the source of the data and how it actually gets emitted to how it needs to show up at the very end of the pipeline. So there's an element of kind of owning things in the experience that you have. I think generally kind of a curiosity in how you learn and being able to self-reflect also on the work that you've done and understand where you might have gone wrong or where you could have changed paths in your approach. So that ability to kind of self-reflect and be aware of what you could have done better is also, I think, something we tend to look for in our paths, which I think doesn't necessarily show that you don't have confidence in yourself. It can actually show that you have the ability to kind of look at a project and identify where things could have gone better, where you could have done things differently. Now that you kind of have hindsight is 2020, you can kind of see things a bit clearer.
Thank you. Lucy, would you have said something similar or similar things that have already been discussed?
The kind of point you made on like being like say someone admitting not sure and not knowing, I think that's something I think like I've kind of learned from when I first started. I'd be like, I'm advanced in this skill, or I'm advanced in this, or I definitely know the answer to this. I think it's about kind of being like, I don't know that. In a real situation, I'll go and look that up, or especially in an interview process. I think that's the main thing I would agree with.
Okay, like an observation, which is kind of interesting. A lot of the interviews that people are going to be going on are going to be based on hard skills. So things like how good are you at SQL? Can you identify data quality problems in this pipeline? A lot of the things that you guys have all mentioned have been very soft skills, their attitudes, values. Maybe a question for Lucy. Is that just because you kind of generalize and say these are the things that are non-specific for different job families, so these are the things that I'm highlighting, or are they more important?
I think for me, for hiring, like I always when everyone's like, oh, what kind of skills do we want hire for? I'm like, SQL and then anything else. And I just always say that because I think it's just like, you just want like a baseline knowledge and then somebody with a really good attitude to learning on the job, because I've been through that and I know that's how I've learned. So I just, you have your kind of, you have some level of degree of skill in an area that works. And then the BI tool that we use or the data warehouse that we use isn't really that important. So I guess, and I know how I can pick up a skill in a few weeks or months or whatever it is. So I think that's probably why I guess I would say it's downplayed as within an interview process. So it's more about being honest about what you know, and then what you don't know, it's about just demonstrating how you have learned things and developed in different areas before. But so I think that's probably why
Just to add to that, I think it's also because there are so many strong technical candidates, and because the technology is making our ability to be technical kind of, it lowers the playing field a bit. It's what makes someone like good to great, because it's like and you can communicate it and lead and like those other things that come with it. So I think that's why it's a differentiator. I also have an issue with it being called soft skills, but maybe that's my own concern. And it's like, oh, it's not that great. But yeah, I do think it's I think it's an interesting question as to like why we've all said it.
I think also it's fairly easy to test for technical skills in an interview process. We all have I'm presuming a technical round in some way. So it's pretty easy to get that, to understand where someone's skills lie. It's your ability to do all of the other stuff that I think gives you a bit more, gives us a bit more of an understanding of where you fit in kind of the leveling based on your experience and the types of projects that you can take on. Because the SQL skills is one thing, but like if you can take big problems and break them down and then execute on them, or if you can take something that's really ambiguous and complicated and has a lot of different stakeholders and, you know, impacts a lot of different parts of the business, that's very different. Whereas like SQL skills are SQL skills. You could have them at a very early stage in your career, and then after, at some point, it's tough to kind of develop them further.
Right, completely agree. To move on to a different part, and this is probably going to be one of the last kind of questions that we explore a little bit. A question for Holly. What kind of leadership style do you think you admire and you think works well in different companies?
Yeah, I think for me, I think there's that ability to give direct feedback and in a way that is compassionate. I think that's one of the things where when you're very junior in your career, you want those like quote unquote nice managers who like let you do nice things and log off early and that kind of thing. That's what you think, oh, that's great, they're a great manager. But actually, I think it's that ability to be kind to people, but actually hold them to account, give them good feedback, you know, help people and give that kind of really clear feedback that aligns to a clear vision of the team. I think it's actually quite rare to find someone who can do, you know, good feedback really well. And I think as you kind of move on in your career and you hit those kind of roadblocks in your career, whether, you know, whatever it is, you need those kind of people to give you that kind of direct and compassionate feedback to help you move through. And actually it often resonates really well with stakeholders, and, you know, those are the kind of people that hold a lot of influence. So I think it's around, you know, being able to influence people in the right way, but in a compassionate way, so that people really buy into your vision. For me, I think, because maybe that's my personality type, I think that's what I always look for, you know, in a manager, in the person who's going to be running my strategic vision. And it's something that I try and implement kind of further down to my employees as well. I think giving feedback is something that's quite new to me, and it can feel quite alien and uncomfortable to be like, you're doing this wrong. It feels like you're doing this wrong, but actually in the long term, you're helping that person out. And I think it's one of those things that you have to flex your skill set for, that it doesn't come naturally to some people, but it's just something that you have to practice getting better at.
How does that interplay with your sensations of imposter syndrome? So you need to give someone feedback, and you have your own feelings like, I don't know everything about this. Do I have legitimacy in being able to give them this criticism?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, because I think you have kind of, again, it's that kind of understanding everyone's human, everyone's going to make mistakes, you're going to make mistakes, and you can give feedback to someone just because you're not perfect. And I think that's probably part of the uncomfortable part of it, is feeling like, why am I okay to give someone this feedback? But actually, I think as you kind of get further into your career and you've managed different people and you've seen different people grow in different ways in the way that you want them to grow, I think being able, you know, I think that actually does reduce quite a lot. I think you don't feel that so acutely as when you start to either lead or manage a team.
I'm happy to ask another question on leadership, or pass the same question over to any of you guys. Otherwise, there's one last question I wanted to ask, which is more positive, but we've only got a few minutes left. That is right this time. 2 minutes left. No? Okay, so on the leadership style, I think Sara is probably good. Oh, right. Okay. Okay. People might mean me. Okay. In which case, I'm going to ask one last question. It's going to be very short, but can you guys tell me just in a few sentences, what has been your proudest professional achievement since you've started your career in data? And Lucy, let's start with you. And feel free to just pass it down.
Sit slowly so you have more time.
So biggest achievement, I think I always say it is like my role at Wolf and Badger, which was where I was the first data hire. So I got to like build a whole data platform myself, worked with Mel. And it was kind of a big achievement for me because I didn't know I could do or achieve something like that. And it's kind of like starting and building something from scratch. And put me in a path that enabled me to go and work in this role and kind of showed me, what I was capable of in working in a small company and those kind of things. So I think you can get that in larger companies, you can get that in different ways, like working on projects like that. And so, that's kind of my biggest achievement. I'm always very proud of what I did there.
Thank you. I think mine is at my last role, I onboarded and kind of changed the BI tooling that we use in the business. It was really unpopular. And I was like, oh, I actually have I can make this happen. You know, I can go in and change that. I can talk to people. I can sell it. I can, bring the right people in. I can get, negotiate good business contracts. I was like, I have the power to do this, but I have to do it. And I think I wouldn't have necessarily done that before my last role, but I think being empowered to be able to kind of make choices about what I thought the direction of the tooling should be and drive that myself to influence people, I think would be my greatest achievement.
I'm going to do two, but quickly. One was knowing when to leave. So I joined a big corporate company a telco, and I was there like 6 months in, and I had, I think, great ideas about what we should do with the data. And after 3 or 4 months, it was clear they were never going to change like how the teams were structured and what data we could join together. And I was like, this does not work for me. I don't work in an oil tanker. It doesn't suit my personality. I'm going to leave, even though I was worried that it would look bad on my CV. So I was that was like a good moment. And then my second good moment was joining where I am now. I felt like a moment of what I describe as like bravery, like, can I do that job? They've had people join and leave before. Could I be better than them? What are they going to compare me to? It was a chief data officer role. I was joining as a VP. What does that mean for me? And then I was like, fuck it. And I did. And I'm really, really glad I did. And it's working out for me. So I think it's like that moment of like knowing when to leave and knowing when to just like step up and back yourself.
Honestly, hard to pick one specific thing. I'll pick one from the last year, which is we in almost a year ago, actually, exactly, we launched under 16s as a Monzo product. So you can now sign up your kids if they're between the ages of 6 and 16, and they have their own bank card, and they can use their own kind of version of the app, and they can spend money and see how they're spending and where they're spending. It's all very exciting. But what that meant for us from a data perspective was we introduced a whole new type of user into our ecosystem. So we had business users, we had personal users, and now all of a sudden we had to introduce child users who needed to exist in their own right in our warehouse, but couldn't be used in certain regulatory reporting. We don't necessarily consider them like an active user, but we need them to exist alongside adults, and basically needed to introduce them in the entirety of our pipeline without breaking anything and screwing up the reporting for the business, and also doing it in a way that regulators were happy with. So to be honest, that was one of the most stressful parts, was when we first started testing with it. And I ended up learning a ton about basically every single data model that we have on users, and that kind of originates from that part of it. And obviously took a lot of coordination with all the other AE teams in the business to make sure we weren't screwing up their stuff. And then working with a whole bunch of other departments, everything from finance and reg affairs to the growth part of the business, and to payments and all kinds of other stuff. So massive achievement, and we didn't cause any incidents, so I'm pretty proud of it.
Thank you. And we're going to pass over now to Q&A questions. I was almost going to give a mini round of applause to the speakers, but I think you might ask them really difficult questions. Well, let's do it anyway. I think it takes a certain amount of courage to want to come up and speak in a panel. So thank you, all of you, for joining and for giving us your insight. Okay, so we've got now
Matchbox.
a cube with a microphone in it, and we're going to throw it to people who have questions. So if you guys have any questions, please put your hands up. Yes.
Ready?
Oh, well done.
Sorry. Is this on? Yes. I guess for women in tech, one very important topic of conversation discussion is promotions and pay transparency. So how did you advocate for yourselves? And if you have any tips for anyone else in the room?
I'm going to need to move the microphone to the person, but is there anyone in particular that you were directing the question to?
No, just everyone.
Okay, all right. I'm going to start with Lucy, and people feel free to jump in if you have some comments. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question.
I think the main thing I've learned recently about promotions is you need to really evidence what you do and shout about what you do and shout about your achievements, because I would never do that. And that's where I've learned where kind of my failing of, I'm like, oh, I feel like I could have done that role or done that. And then they're like, I didn't even know you worked here, kind of thing. But not to that degree. But I think it's like, if you've done something good, send an email, send a Slack message, shout about it a bit. And people appreciate it, people love to read it, and I think it's also part of that imposter syndrome. People do want to hear what you've done. So I'd say that one of my main things.
Yeah, for me to take on the pay side, I think the part about making friends is really important. Speak to people, find out what their salary is, especially your peers. I think that's really important, because you essentially knowledge is power. I think basically I've been in that position where you find out and you're like, they're on what? It's just crazy. And I think you can only do that by chatting to people. You have to just get that information, sadly, out of people. And actually, often it's beneficial for everyone to know what salaries are kind of. And if you're at a company where they don't disclose that in the hiring brackets, I think you have to go out there and find it out for yourself.
Yeah, I'd ask what the salary bands are. I'd just be like really explicit. And then probably assume you're not asking for enough whenever you ask for things, because that is a trait. But yeah, salary band. I mean, your business should provide salary bands and growth frameworks. It's like a basic human right these days.
Yeah, we do the same. I think once you're in role, there's obvious things like, ask if you're not happy with your pay and you think you're not paid enough, talk to your manager about it and say, I don't think I'm being paid enough. Pay me more. And they can always say no, and that's fair enough. I think the other thing to remember is your manager is not your therapist. So when you have conversations with your manager, it is a very thoughtful conversation of, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm blocked on. Help me. This is how I'm approaching it. Is that right? Do you have any opinions? And it's getting that feedback loop going, because your manager should know your success story so that they can advocate for you in other meetings. And if you're sitting there and talking to your manager about your problems and complaining about things, they're going to be thinking, yeah, of course I'll help them, because that's what I'm here for and I care about them. But also they don't seem to be able to handle what I'm giving them. So the way to kind of grow your role and in turn grow your salary is to show your manager how capable you are, and give them the tools to be able to give you promotion opportunities and raises and to talk about you in other rooms. So I think that's the main thing for me. Honestly, I'm bad at this because I've never asked for a pay raise. They just kind of have given it to me.
You're just so good.
I honestly, it's not, I mean, I am good. Thank you. But no, it's not, I genuinely haven't. And I've been able to show my evidence keep a brag list, obviously, keep a list of achievements, give it to your manager every time you have a performance review, line it up for them, make it easy for them so they can copy paste it into their side. And give them all the evidence they need. If it's conversations, proposals, documents you've written, work that you've done, bang it all out and send it to them directly. But yeah, I think that's the main thing, is like, you don't need to show every weakness of yours to your manager either. If you can get advice from other people, obviously use them for advice and coaching when you need to, but they don't need to know about every single thing you're struggling with.
Thank you, guys. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you for sharing your experiences. It's been really insightful. So my question is about like how you gauge your performance before having the official annual review conversation with your boss. The reason why I'm asking is I used to work in sales and marketing, so I always had numeric KPIs and short-term KPIs. and I just started to work as a product analyst, and I don't have any like numeric KPIs. I only have like initiatives. So I think, and this leads up to my like imposter syndrome as well, because I don't know how others think of me, and how I don't know how others think of my performance. So I don't know. So I'm curious how you gauge your performance.
Should we pass it back to Lucy? Work our way down.
I would say, yeah, I'm probably not. Maybe I'm not supposed to do first because we don't have very strict performance reviews, but you can. I think similar to setting your goals with your manager is you can make them like performance based. You can make your own performance kind of like metrics that you can internally do. I want to push this much code or like provide this much analysis and those kind of things. It is quite hard in some roles to kind of quantify what you are doing, but because you're in data, you can make data on yourself. Like one thing that we do in our team is just to kind of gauge that we're being productive is we really get into Jira and tracking like what we're pushing and what we're producing, because that's really important at the moment. So no one's kind of formalized it, but I use it as a tool. I'm like, oh, we've closed 30 tickets this week. This is more than last, and push those numbers to people, because it doesn't mean anything sometimes to some people, but you can be like, we've closed 30 tickets. I was like, that's great. Maybe last week we did 60, but that kind of thing. So you can make your own metrics.
And I think you can you don't have to wait for that end of year. You should be getting feedback basically every time you're having a one-to-one with your manager, which should be, all key stakeholders should be, every 2 weeks, ideally every week, but depending on the cadence of your company. But you should be asking for and getting direct feedback, pretty much regularly. So by the time it's your end of year review, it's almost just like a formal tick box that everything, you've gone through it, and they're just sending it off to the higher powers that be to formalize that in some kind of way. But I think don't wait for those kind of quarter year, half year reviews. Get feedback every time that you speak to your manager.
Yeah, the final thing I'd add, because I think you covered a lot of ground there, is like on the things you are doing, which you can't quantify, you can't drive like draw a direct line to sales or whatever. Just whenever you're doing a piece of work, follow up on the outcome. Like go and speak to that person. Like, did you make a different decision? Did you choose a different path? Like, did you whatever that thing was? Because yes, it's good to have measurable things, but also some of the value you might be bringing on are the types of decisions that people are making. The only way you could do that is like ask the person after the fact, because it helps you can then build up a bank of not just the outputs, but the outcomes.
I think you can also ask questions like, do you have any concerns about my performance? Am I on the trajectory that you expect me to be on? You can ask questions like that give you direct feedback as to what the expectations are of your manager versus where you are, and then point out specific tasks and like, is there anything I've missed in this? Are there other ways that I could have gone about and figured out this problem?
Thank you.
Can I ask a small follow-up question on something that you mentioned, Klara? You said to check that I'm on the right trajectory. What would you do if you're a person and you actually don't know what your trajectory is? You might not know what your career progression is or what the next step looks like. How would you have that conversation with your manager?
I mean, you can always build a PDP and I mean, I have monthly development talks with my people, but whatever kind of cadence you tend to have with your manager, likely you can ask for a longer development conversation. And then you can ask them for help on outlining what role might be next for you in the company, or, even if it's outside of the company, what might be next. And then work with them to understand what skills and what behaviors do I need to show in order for you to feel confident that I'm ready for that next role. So it ends up being, I mean, it can also be a plan that you put together yourself and then kind of check your understanding with your manager. But if you have a good manager, they should be having development conversations with you in like, this is where you should be going next, or where you could be going next. And these are the different milestones to hit on the way there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
To Sara, if you could start your parent role over again today, what would you do differently?
What I'm doing, I'm only 3 months in.
But that 3 months.
I think that's a great question. I think I would just stop comparing myself to the person who was in it before. because I do think that's I've created my own problem. So I do that differently, and then and so that would help me with any negative thinking. And then the other thing I do is probably advocate more to be my role within the C-suite, SLT, whatever you want to call it. My business is on I love B2B. I think it's amazing, but it's definitely on a journey in terms of understanding the role of data within the business. And so I probably could have done more pre-work actually in the interview in that, which would have helped me.
Thank you. More questions?
Gonna go first.
Hey.
No, you go first. Okay, so one question is, what would you suggest how to fight discrepancies when you are looking for roles as a woman of color? So, or have you come across any mentees who've had situations which has been disturbing, and what would your suggestion, advice be for one such? In data, of course.
Does anyone? Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel able to answer the first question because I can only talk about my experience as a white woman. And so I wouldn't be able to talk about those of others. Of the experiences I've known about through other people, that would be the only way that I could talk about it. But I do think as a hiring manager, the best person must be employed for the job, but you have to have the diverse pool to get that best person. And so I really strongly believe in that and work very closely with our really good talent team to make sure that that happens. And what that means is they have to seek out new people to work with because we don't get a diverse pool naturally. And so I suppose just in terms of when I'm thinking about building a team and how we make sure we do have a diverse mix of people in all the ways we should, we have to seek out new partnerships. We have to seek out new ways of hiring people because otherwise we just won't get a different result. I hope that answered some of the question.
Yeah.
I think one other thing, if it's an algorithm or whatever bias based on name or based on whatever that is kind of causing that, I think trying as much as possible to bypass the system and having coffee conversations or getting to know people within the organization directly can be a way to kind of bypass some of the bias that's built into recruitment systems. Shouldn't be necessary.
Thank you. Were there more questions there? Yes.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Priscilla. I do have a question. So basically, I've been working as a data analyst for a few years now. And something that I've noticed working with non-technical stakeholders is that most of the time we fall into ad hoc data projects, which means that most of the time we basically need to fix or identify some data issues. But what I enjoy about being a data analyst is working on more proactive stuff. So basically, and my question is, how do you manage to land those projects? So, because you do get worried about doing ad hoc reports, stuff like that, and the proactive stuff is the stuff that I really enjoy doing. So, how do you get to land those projects?
If I can pass that question over to Lucy and Holly.
I've done a lot of ad hoc data projects. It is, yeah, it's kind of, and it's still part of my job today. I still have to pick up a random file. And I think that's kind of, when I talk to more people in data, it's a problem we all have. I think you just got to balance your time on, kind of trying to change what your stakeholders like, this is urgent, this is needed now, to maybe we could, make a larger project out of this, or maybe do more. I guess it depends also in the organization and what kind of how your role sits within other roles, and maybe moving from a data analyst role into more analytics engineering, or moving in further away from stakeholder sometimes gets you more space to work on different projects, maybe more in data science and that kind of thing. But yeah, it also is just an everyday part of the data world at the moment as well.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I think you have to I think sometimes it's definitely comes, you need that leadership change of thinking of it as a product that you're working on, not as a service, like a service desk. And that's really hard if you can't persuade your manager to think like that, then it's really hard. But I think if you can alleviate, the way that you can kind of alleviate that is through culture change. And it's really hard as one person, almost impossible. But if you can make small inroads with maybe problematic, the stakeholders that ask you the most, or if you can kind of build good relationships with those stakeholders, that can often help, to be able to, like you said about open dialogue around different things, and it becomes easier. But unfortunately, it's often your team needs to be structured like that to make it happen, and that's a hard change to move from like a service role to a more of a product kind of style.
I've got one as
Yes.
well. I'll try to be quick. A specific question perhaps for Klara and Holly, because I feel like I want to hear from both of you, because I feel like you might have different approach. So the question I've got is like the most common basic question during interview, but I feel like it's like a very difficult one to answer. So you guys talk about sort of like the soft skills traits earlier about resilience. So, one of the most common one is like, how do you deal with most like difficult stakeholders? Like, give me an example when you have to push back or you have different opinions. So I think for me personally, I'm just struggling to find like the best approach to answer these. I think there's no kind of specific guidelines or examples I can find from online. So I think just wanted to hear from you guys, like probably just as candidates, how would you approach this? And also from hiring's perspective, like what are they looking for?
Klara.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Obviously situational and everything, but I think the one thing that is important to convey in that answer is that you understand where the stakeholder is coming from, but you didn't necessarily agree with their approach. And then ideally that you kind of took them from their point of view and moved them somewhere, not necessarily all the way to your point of view, but that you move them slightly further away from their point of view. So you were able to, and that you don't have any kind of malice or negative feeling towards that stakeholder, right? So you show that empathy, that you know where they're coming from and where their problems are, and then you adjusted both your style, but also were able to kind of convince them or change a little bit of their kind of emotions along the way.
Yeah. Could you share any examples, specific ones?
Specific examples from my own thing. Yeah, I mean, I in the whole Monzo kids in the under 16s project, I had a difficult stakeholder who thought that we were going to break the entire warehouse with the testing that we did on the project. I understand where they were coming from because their responsibility is that warehouse, and they obviously don't want everything to break and feel very responsible for it. But equally, I knew that I had done the due diligence to make sure that we weren't going to break the entire warehouse. So what I ended up doing was writing up like a one-pager detailing specifically where the data, what was going to be emitted, and why it wasn't going to be a problem, and outlining how we actually handled it, and then was able to present that back to them to give them the confidence in what we were doing. And then also ask for feedback afterwards to understand, what do I need to do next time, or how can I communicate this better to you so that you have a better level of understanding and you feel confident with us moving forward with testing.
Yeah, sorry to be. That was a great answer. I don't have anything to to add. Unfortunately, from a different perspective, I think it's from very similar. Very similar. Understanding where the line is that you can give. You can take someone on a journey, but only up to a point. And I also think it's showing those kind of acts. People say that they listen, but it's that active listening, making people feel heard. Because often difficult stakeholders just are worried, like you say. And I think it's making sure that you portray that you understand why they feel like that and what you're going to do to make sure that those scenarios that they flag will not happen. But yeah, nothing, I think, yeah, great answer.
I've done a lot of interviews in the last year, so.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes, that was a very emphatic hand up.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. We've already got one.
And it won't take long.
Okay, so final two questions, and then that's it.
So I just wanted to ask around, how do you guys talk yourself down from when you get a requirement from a stakeholder and you essentially want to do like the optimal, I'm only going to do this once thing, to actually just giving them, I guess, the 0.1 of 5, if that makes sense. So the simplest version, even if you want to perhaps just do the most complex, innovative thing, when actually it probably take you a lot longer to complete just than doing the most simpler thing. How do you kind of talk yourself away from that, let's say?
So I shouldn't answer that because I'm of the good enough camp, like for life. So I don't know who.
I'm kind of partly in that camp as well, but I think it's usually how I always like sell like doing the longer version of the task when I want to is that will eventually mean that we can get faster going forward. Like we can just give you give you the report now, or we can build something a bit more sustainable and we can build on it. So therefore the next time you come with a similar request, it will be faster than the current thing. And yeah, the balance, like it's a hard balance, but usually simpler is better. And sometimes you do just have to say, you know what, is this going to be used again? Often with like working in like retail use cases, it can be like once we look at this once a quarter or once a year, we don't really need to do this, like automate. Currently where I work, like automation is kind of like the go-to thing. So yeah, it's if you want to try and like push with stakeholders on and convincing that, it's like, what's the bigger vision? How will this then mean? What can they get out of it later down the line? And can it mean that you can build stuff faster or you get, get something better out of it at the end?
Yeah. Do I chuck this back?
Yeah.
Hi.
Final question.
Final question, yes. So where do you get your understanding about any new technologies? How do you source that information? And where do you think your role is headed now that we have all this OpenAI, Gen AI, whatever, coming ahead? And if someone is just starting, where do you see their role heading in, let's say, 5 years?
Very big questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to, Sara, pass over to
Sorry.
you.
I have AI in my title and it makes me laugh quite a lot. But jokes aside, so I think a big part of my job is to find out new things in technology, yes, but also in like capability and how other people are doing things. And I think the upside of COVID is there's loads more webinars, which are way more accessible for people to join in the day. And there's, there's lots of them, like Women in Data One, like I think ThoughtSpot do loads of good webinars. So there's like loads of them out there. So I do try and join quite a lot and listen to quite a lot, and a few podcasts along the way too. And then in terms of where I think that's going, I think we're at this like incredible point of change. And I think we just also need to like hold on and slow down a little bit. So both of those things are true. So finding like really great tooling that can improve our productivity through AI, absolutely, like easy. We should be doing that. We will be doing that as much as we can, but also building for the long term in terms of like AI driven products to customers. That's also within our path. But at the same time, our analytics engineers are rebuilding our whole data model. And so none of that works if we don't have the basics right. So basically our strategy is like try to learn to walk at the same time as trying to learn how to run, and like try to manage stakeholder expectations through that process. So yeah, hopefully that's a useful answer.
Oh yeah. I think from the learning perspective, just like coming to events like this, making sure we're going to like conferences, like Big Data London, those kind of places, I think often they're the best way to see what's going on in the industry. I think talking to people outside of your immediate organization is always good, seeing how different people are doing stuff. I think it's very easy just to come siloed in the way that you've done it. And then I think just seeing what is happening in the industry is definitely, I find, the best way to actually see how you can make improvements in your kind of as a general kind of whole to your tooling, technology, structure, that kind of thing.
I guess, yeah, from kind of where I feel like the role is heading, I feel like as a trend in terms of data and what I'm kind of hearing as well from everyone is it's kind of going back to fundamentals. I think everyone's kind of gone, oh, we can do all this stuff really fast, really amazing, then gone, actually, our data is horrible, and we need to kind of really go back to the fundamentals of how we should be storing it, where it should be stored. Do we even need to look at this data kind of things, but more on data governance, like how should other teams be accessing our data? We've realized that they have too much and they shouldn't be able to, see some of these things. These kind of things I think have become more important. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I've kind of started to focus my learning now. It's like, yeah, we can do all these cool things with data, but actually the really boring fundamentals are actually really important and the best thing to learn alongside using AI to maybe enhance your productivity and your learning.
Thank you, guys. That's pretty much it. I wanted to close off with some kind of summary or takeaways. I think this is my strategy consulting background, but I wanted to pass it over to each one of the panelists. And if you can, guys, tell me one of the key things that you'd want people to take away after this discussion. So starting with you, Klara, let's just pass it down.
Cool. Can I talk about something I haven't said yet? Is that, yeah? I think we touched on mentorship before, and I think it's really important. Mentorship is important and is a really great way to learn. I think one thing as women we don't do enough is look for male mentors. There's only a handful of women that tend to be in higher positions at companies, right? It kind of gets weeded out for various reasons. And we're not quite there yet in terms of gender parity higher up in organizations. So we end up kind of almost burdening more senior women with I'm looking for a mentor, be my mentor. When in reality, there's a ton of other men that are out there and that can give you a lot of insight into your careers. And I think we don't always take advantage of it because it can be uncomfortable, especially for a younger woman to be seen with an older man outside of a work circumstance. It can be a bit weird, but it's an incredibly valuable learning opportunity. I've had women and men mentors, and both have been equally valuable. So I would say don't kind of cut out a ton of the population on that one trait. You can find other ways to do it. You can do breakfasts and lunches and things kind of in office hours, because I think that's a lot of the thing that we end up missing as women is a lot of men get their mentorship kind of in the evenings and out of hours, and it becomes a really easy way to do it. Whereas for women, it can be a bit more uncomfortable. So I would say look outside of just women for advice and for mentorship.
I agree with that. I think my reflection or takeaway would be about do the self-reflection on what environments you get energy from and you work really well in. Be honest with yourself about what works for you, and then seek out environments which enable that. Be it within your own company or moving to a different company. And so don't just think about what they want from you, think about what you want from them.
I think for me, I think we all, when you speak, actually, lots of people have basically the same issues, the same struggles, the same kind of things that they need to work on. And actually, so I think having open conversations with people, both inside and outside your organization, is really important to realize, a lot of the things are not, you don't have to struggle with those alone, or you don't have to try and deal with them alone. Actually, someone's gone through it before and they can give you kind of direct help with that, and you don't have to feel like you're really weird and you're the only one that's struggling and you can't do anything. So yeah, seek out those kind of people that you can have those kind of conversations with.
I was gonna say a really similar thing, so I'll add to it. Yeah, but yeah, I think that is the fun thing about coming to events like this and chatting with people is that you're always I'm having this problem, especially in the data space. It's quite small. People are always having the same issues as you, so it's good to get validation, help with that imposter syndrome and those kind of things. So yeah.
Great, that's it. I wanted to say, head of the game, big thank you to our 4 panelists. So Klara, Sara, Holly, and Lucy. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you. It was quite a long session. I'm glad that you guys kept up your energy right till the end. So thank you so much. Final things, and then you guys are free. The next London Analytics Engineering Meetup is on the 10th of April. It's at Monzo. You didn't know that? As always, your feedback really matters to us. There's a QR code. Come and speak to the Cognify guys if there's something you feel like we should change, if the format doesn't quite work. So please come and let us know. And talk ideas are also appreciated. So any feedback, we're very open to it. And that's always very much appreciated. And then thank you to Datatonic for hosting us. This, as you guys probably know, because you got the emails, there was a venue change very last minute. So we appreciate them putting this all together. And it's such a nice office as well. So thank you so much. And finally, the Parlor Pub for after speaker drinks. So please come. You can have more drinks, more conversations, more networking. And for any of the panelists that are coming, you can ask them lots more in-depth questions. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming.